All right, strap yourselves in, because today we're diving deep into something causing a real stir in Ireland. The proposed hate crime bill.
Yeah, it's definitely sparking a lot of debate.
But we're not getting bogged down in all the legal mumbo-jumbo today.
Right.
We're going beyond that, looking at the emotional side of things, the
Hmm.
anxieties, the strong reactions this bill is facing. It's like taking the temperature of a society, wrestling with these huge questions about identity and faith. What do you think?
I think that's spot on. What's
Yeah.
really interesting here is how people's reactions to this bill really reveal this deeper clash of values, anxieties about how fast society is changing, and even like fears about the future of religious freedom in Ireland, you know?
It's like this bill has become a lightning rod for all those bigger issues, wouldn't you say?
For sure.
And to get a real feel for that, we're going to look at two really different sources.
Okay.
First up, we have this, well, almost confrontational interview with Archbishop Eamon Martin.
Oh, wow.
He's the primate of all Ireland, the highest-ranking Catholic official in the country, for anyone who might not know.
Yeah, yeah.
And this interview happens right outside St. Patrick's Cathedral in Armagh.
Okay.
Adds another layer to it all, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that location is so symbolic.
Right. St. Patrick's Cathedral, it's this grand historic landmark, you know? It represents this enduring presence of the Catholic Church in Ireland.
Exactly.
And then, right there on its doorstep, you have this almost ambush-style interview, these individuals directly challenging the Archbishop.
It's intense.
Yeah, pressing him to take a public stand against the bill.
Like they're saying, this is our home turf, you need to defend it.
Yeah.
They see this bill as an urgent threat to their beliefs, but also to children.
And they don't hold back, do they? They use
Yeah.
really strong language, things like, our children are being told they can change their gender, and this will lead to child abuse again.
Oh, I mean, that immediately raises the stakes.
Definitely. It's a really powerful rhetorical strategy. By bringing up the safety of children, it taps into this primal fear, a sense of moral urgency. And they just keep calling on the Archbishop to do something, to be a vocal leader in this fight.
So how does he respond? He doesn't give them that fiery denunciation they're looking for, does he?
No, not really. It's much more measured, almost hesitant, you could say. He acknowledges that he does speak out on issues, but not always in the way people expect. You can almost feel the tension between what the interviewers want, this immediate action, and his more cautious approach. It's almost like he's trying to de-escalate the situation, even saying at one point, I have confessions to hear.
It's almost funny, right?
Right.
But it shows you where he's at. Head of the church, having to navigate these super sensitive issues, tons of weight on his shoulders.
Yeah, it's a tough position to be in.
But that doesn't satisfy the critics we hear from in our second source.
Right.
A video analysis that picks apart this interview and takes things to a whole new level.
Yeah, that's where you see these anxieties about societal change really come to the forefront.
For the critics in this video,
Yeah.
the Archbishop's silence, or what they perceive as silence, is a betrayal.
Yeah.
Like he's failing to protect them from what they see as this dangerous attack on their faith.
Exactly. They believe their whole way of life is under threat.
And they make it crystal clear their worries go way beyond just hate speech, don't they?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They're saying this bill isn't just about protecting people from discrimination, but it's about fundamentally redefining gender in every aspect of Irish law.
Wow.
And they call out Helen McEntee specifically, the Minister for Justice. They accuse her of straight up lying to the Irish people about how big this bill really is, what it will really do.
They don't mince words.
Nope. They use strong language, terms like crusade, erasing Christian belief, betraying our young people. This isn't just some legal debate for them. It's about their whole worldview being threatened.
And this fear is rooted in their understanding of gender, that traditional family structure.
Right.
They believe that by acknowledging and protecting gender identity, this bill is a direct attack on those traditional values. What do you make of that?
We have to understand the context, right? Ireland has gone through these really rapid social changes in recent years. More acceptance of LGBTQ plus rights.
Okay.
And for some, that change feels like a loss of control, like things are moving away from the familiar, the comfortable social order. And this hate crime bill becomes a symbol of that.
Symbol of that bigger change.
Exactly.
And that fear, it's so clear in their discussion of how the bill might impact children, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. They argue that it'll pressure kids to question their gender identity, to maybe transition without really understanding what that means.
Big consequences.
Huge. And they bring up the Tavistock Clinic in the UK, the one that closed down recently.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
It's a really complex case, but basically, this clinic was accused of rushing young people into transitioning. And in the end, it was shut down after a review found some really serious problems.
So for these critics of the Irish bill, Tavistock becomes this example of the dangers they see.
Right.
This idea that kids who are vulnerable could be hurt by a system that they think puts affirmation ahead of careful thought.
It's a powerful argument.
It is,
Yeah.
and it ties into a wider concern about the government's role in such personal matters.
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it?
For these critics, the state is overstepping, interfering in family life, maybe even telling parents how to raise their kids.
It's a slippery slope, they'd argue.
And it's fascinating how they connect that abstract concept of redefining gender to these very specific emotional worries about children and families. And that brings us to the case of Enoch Burke.
Oh, right.
They really hammer home their point with his story.
Yeah.
Tell us, who's Enoch Burke and why does his case matter here?
Well, Enoch Burke's a teacher in Ireland, and he was actually imprisoned for refusing to use gender-neutral pronouns for a student.
Wow.
He became a symbol, for those who believe that traditional gender roles and language should be upheld no matter what.
Even if society is changing around them.
Exactly.
So these critics use Burke as a warning then.
Right. They said, look what happened to him. If this hate crime bill passes, anyone who thinks like him, even teachers just trying to follow what they believe, could face legal trouble.
It's a powerful image for them, isn't it?
It is. They present him as a martyr, a victim of this intolerant secular agenda that they see as encroaching on their freedom of religion.
And they really believe that Christians in Ireland will be marginalized, even persecuted.
They really do. It's a deep-seated fear for them. And, listening to all of this, it really strikes me how intensely personal and emotional this whole issue is for those who oppose this bill.
Yeah.
It's not just about some legal concepts. It's about who they are, how they understand the world, their whole way of life.
And how do you navigate beliefs that strong in a society that's becoming more diverse? One where those traditional values are being questioned more and more.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that societies all over the world are wrestling with right now. We see these debates happening everywhere, not just in Ireland. Gender identity, the role of religion in today's world, these are flashpoints,
Yeah.
They trigger intense emotions, and sometimes they even fuel those political divides.
It's like watching a global culture clash in real time, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
On one hand, you have these calls for more inclusion, for recognizing and protecting LGBTQ plus rights.
Right.
And on the other, there are those who see those changes as a direct threat to their own values, their understanding of faith.
And you can't forget that these aren't just theoretical debates. They have real consequences for people's lives.
Oh, for sure.
Think about transgender individuals, for example.
Yeah,
Legal recognition and protection can be life-changing. It
Right.
can literally save lives.
absolutely. But we also can't just dismiss the concerns of those who hold those traditional beliefs as like bigotry or ignorance. I mean, from what we're seeing, these anxieties they have, they're real and they feel them deeply.
That's exactly why this kind of exploration is so important. It makes us look at those complexities, understand the different sides of the argument, and realize there are genuine concerns on both sides.
It's easy to get caught up in the back and forth, isn't it?
Yeah.
To demonize the other side. But to move forward as a society, we have to find a way to talk about these issues more thoughtfully, with more compassion.
I agree, and that starts with listening to each other, trying to get where those fears are coming from, even if we don't agree with them.
Which, I'll be honest, it's not always easy. I mean, listening to those sources, you can feel how intense it all is. The interviewer is practically begging the Archbishop to take a stand. The critics convinced that this bill is a direct attack on their way of life. How do you even begin to bridge that gap?
That's why it's so crucial to come at these conversations with empathy and an open mind. We can't give in to that urge to simplify everything, to boil it all down to sound bites and slogans.
And then at the end of that video analysis, there's that call to action, right?
Yeah.
It really highlights how urgent they feel things are.
For sure. They're urging viewers to contact their TDs, that's a member of parliament. For anyone listening who might not be familiar with Irish politics, and to speak up before it's too late.
A powerful tactic, wouldn't you say?
It is. They're channeling that fear and anxiety into action, trying to mobilize their base and put pressure on lawmakers to vote against the bill.
It really shows you how much is at stake for them.
Absolutely.
For them, it's not about a law, it's about the soul of Irish society.
Yeah, it's about protecting What they see is those foundational values of their nation. And, it raises this really crucial question.
Okay.
In a democracy, how do you balance the rights of individuals with the need to protect the values of the majority? How do you make sure everyone feels heard and respected, even when there are these fundamental disagreements?
Tough question. It is. No easy answers. But I think what we've done here today, looking at all this, it highlights how vital it is to have these tough conversations, to grapple with the complexities, to try to find common ground, even when it feels like we're miles apart.
It's a reminder that progress isn't always straightforward. It can be messy, emotional, and it means navigating these deeply held beliefs and anxieties. But I think in the end, through dialogue, empathy, and listening, we can find a way forward.
We're at this crossroads, aren't we? Trying to figure out how to reconcile these really different views on gender, identity, and the role of faith in today's world.
Exactly. And this hate crime bill, with all the reactions it sparked, has brought those tensions to the surface. It's like holding up a mirror to Irish society and seeing all those anxieties and hopes reflected back.
And it's not just happening in Ireland, is it?
No, not at all.
These debates about gender identity, the role of religion, how we deal with change, they're happening everywhere.
It's a global conversation, and it can get pretty heated. But what we're seeing in Ireland through these sources we've looked at, it's like a mini version of those bigger struggles. It reminds us that these aren't just abstract philosophical ideas. They impact real people's lives, how they feel seen, how they feel valued.
So where do we go from here? I mean, after all this, I feel like we have more questions than answers.
Right.
How do we balance those individual rights with the need for respectful dialogue? How do we find common ground when people feel like their core beliefs are being challenged?
I think the first step is acknowledging how complicated it all is. We have to resist that urge to oversimplify, to reduce these issues to simple slogans or sound bites.
Yeah.
We need to recognize that there are genuine concerns on both sides, that people's experiences shape their views.
And that means listening even when it's tough, even when we disagree.
Exactly. Because if we shut down the conversation, the only voices you're going to hear are the loudest ones, the most extreme ones.
And that helps no one.
It just makes those divisions deeper, harder to find solutions that work for everyone. What we've explored today, with all those intense emotions and different viewpoints, it really highlights how important empathy and open-mindedness are when having these conversations.
So for you listening, what does all this mean? Well, like always, we don't have all the answers, but hopefully this deep dive has given you something to think about, some new perspectives to consider.
Because these debates about gender identity, religion, and how society changes, they're not going away. They're happening in our communities, in our families, maybe even within ourselves.
So next time you come across one of these conversations, online, at the dinner table, wherever it might be, take a second to consider the complexities, the nuances, the human stories behind it all.
Because ultimately, we're all navigating this changing world together.
And figuring out how to do that with respect, empathy, and a willingness to listen, well, that might be the most important challenge we face.
I think you're right. He became a sort of cause célèbre. For people who feel like those traditional gender roles and language, they need to be upheld.
Even as things change around them.
Exactly. And so the critics use his case, Burke's case, as this warning.
Right.
Like, look what happened to this guy. If this hate crime bill becomes law, anyone who agrees with him, even teachers just trying to stick to their beliefs, they could get in legal trouble.
Yeah, they could be punished for their beliefs.
That's what they're saying.
It's a powerful image for them.
It is. They present him as a martyr, a victim of this intolerant secular agenda.
They see it as an attack on their freedom.
Yeah, that's encroaching on their freedom of religion.
And they really believe that Christians in Ireland are going to be pushed aside, persecuted even.
They really do. It's a very real fear for them. And listening to all this, it really hits you how much this whole issue is tied up with people's emotions, their personal beliefs for those who are against this bill.
Yeah, you can really feel it.
It's not just about some legal ideas. It's about who they are, how they see the world, their entire way of life.
And so how do you handle such strong beliefs in a society that's becoming more diverse, where those traditional values are being questioned more and more?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's not just Ireland. Societies all over the world are struggling with this. We're seeing these same arguments everywhere. Gender identity, the place of religion in the modern world, these are like flashpoints.
They're hot button issues.
They are. They trigger these really intense feelings, and sometimes they even fuel those divisions between people, those political divides.
It's like we're watching this global clash of cultures happening right now.
Absolutely.
You've got these calls for more inclusivity, recognizing and protecting LGBTQ plus rights.
Right.
And then on the other side, you have those who see those changes as a direct threat to their own values, how they understand their faith.
And it's important to remember, these aren't just theoretical debates, you
Right.
know. They have real consequences in people's lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about transgender people, for example. Legal recognition, protection from discrimination, that can be life-changing for them.
For sure.
It can literally save lives.
It can.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we can't just dismiss what those with more traditional beliefs are saying, brush it off as bigotry or closed-mindedness.
Right.
I mean, what we're hearing, it's clear those anxieties they have are real and they feel them deeply.
You're absolutely right, and that's exactly why it's so important to look at these issues, to explore them. It forces us to see how complex they are, to understand the different sides of the argument, and to realize that both sides have valid concerns.
It's easy to get sucked into the back and forth, to start demonizing the other side.
It is.
But if we want to move forward as a society, we need to find a better way to talk about these things, to be more thoughtful, more compassionate.
I agree, and I think that starts with really listening to each other, trying to understand where those fears are coming from, even if we don't agree with them.
Which, to be honest, that's not always easy. Listening to those sources, you could feel how intense the feelings are. The interviewers practically begging the Archbishop to take a stand, the critics totally convinced that this bill is going to destroy their way of life.
Yeah.
How do you even begin to bridge a gap that wide?
Well, I think it comes down to having these conversations with empathy, with an open mind.
Yeah.
We have to resist simplifying things, boiling them down to sound bites and slogans.
Right, because that doesn't get us anywhere.
It doesn't.
And then there's that call to action at the end of the video.
At the end of that analysis, yeah.
It shows how urgently they feel about this.
They're urging people to contact their TDs, their member of parliament, and speak up before it's too late.
It's a powerful tactic.
It is. They're channeling all that fear, that anxiety into action. They want to get their base mobilized, put pressure on those lawmakers to vote against this bill.
It shows you how high the stakes are for them.
Absolutely. It's not just about a law for them. It's about the very soul of Irish society. It's about protecting what they see as the core values of their nation. And, you know, brings up a really crucial question.
Okay.
In a democracy, how do you balance the rights of individuals with the need to protect what the majority believes in? How do you ensure everyone feels heard, feels respected, even when you have these really fundamental disagreements?
That's the tough one.
It is a tough one.
No easy answers there.
Yeah.
But I think what we've done today, looking at all this, it really shows how important it is to have these difficult conversations, to grapple with how complex these issues are, and to try to find some common ground, even when it feels like we're worlds apart.
It's a good reminder that progress doesn't always go in a straight line. It can be messy, emotional, and it requires us to work through these deeply held beliefs, these anxieties. But I think ultimately, through dialogue, through empathy, and through really listening to each other, we can find a way forward.
It's like we're at this crossroads, right? A society trying to figure out how to make all these different perspectives work together, how to fit together these ideas about gender, identity, and the role of faith in our modern world.
Yeah, and this hate crime bill, with all the strong reactions it stirred up, it's really brought all those tensions out into the open. It's like holding up a mirror to Irish society. All those anxieties, those hopes, you see it all reflected back.
And this isn't just happening in Ireland, right? I mean, these debates about gender identity, the role of religion, how we deal with change, it's everywhere these days.
It's a global conversation for sure, and it can get pretty heated. But what we're seeing in Ireland, you know, in the sources we've been talking about, it's like a smaller version of those bigger struggles happening around the world.
Yeah.
It reminds us that these aren't just abstract ideas. They have a real impact on people, on how they feel, how they see themselves, how they feel valued in society.
So where do we go from here? After diving into all this, it feels like we've got more questions than answers. How do we balance individual rights with the need for respectful dialogue? How do we find common ground when people feel like their most fundamental beliefs are under attack?
I think the first step is recognizing just how complicated all of this is. We can't just oversimplify things, boil them down to slogans or sound bites.
Yeah.
We need to see that there are legitimate concerns on both sides of this issue, that people's experiences shape how they see the world.
And that means listening, even when it's tough, even when we completely disagree. If we shut down the conversation, the only voices you're going to hear are the loudest, most extreme ones.
Exactly. And that doesn't help anyone. It just drives people further apart and makes it even harder to find solutions that work for everyone. What we've been exploring today, with all those strong feelings and different points of view, it really shows how important it is to approach these conversations with empathy and an open mind.
So, for you listening, what does all of this mean? Well, like always, we don't have all the answers. But hopefully, this deep dive has given you some things to think about, some new perspectives to consider. Because these debates about gender identity, religion, how society changes, they're not going away. They're happening in our communities, in our families, maybe even within ourselves.
The next time you find yourself in one of these conversations, whether it's online, at your dinner table, in the voting booth, wherever it might be, take a moment. Think about how complex it all is, the nuances, the real stories behind all the headlines.
Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together, trying to figure out how to navigate this changing world. And doing that with respect, with empathy, with a willingness to listen, that might be the most important challenge we face.